Macknick, who works for National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Jordan is their lead energy, water, and land analyst. And he'll tell you about NREL, so I'll let him do that. But he's going to be talking about all the different types of research that NREL is funding and doing around co-location of solar and farming. And I just want to echo what Jimmy said, because I think it's really important that for those of us who are in the room, engaging in this conversation today, taking actions moving forward, people look to New York to be a leader. And so the work that we're doing today, the time that we're spending here today, will pay dividends. So I thank you all for your continued focus and engagement as we move throughout the afternoon. Jordan.
It's great to be here. As Sam mentioned, I'm from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which is a Department of Energy-funded research institution. It's been around since 1977. It's the premier national laboratory devoted to studying all sorts of renewable energy in terms of technologies, their integration, smart grid, microgrids, all sorts of other different types of technologies. I lead the lab's efforts as it relates to interactions with agricultural and land use communities. So I'll be highlighting most of our work focused on the integration of solar and agriculture through our Inspire project. But first, I did want to just talk a little bit. I think there's been a lot of really great points that have been brought up. I think about the state of agriculture and the state of solar development across the country, as well as in the Northeast, as well as on Long Island. And it is quite apparent that there are a lot of ties with the energy sector and agriculture sector. The agriculture sector makes up about 5% or so of the nation's electricity demand. The amount of electricity and other fuel that farms spend can be a significant contributor to their overall expenses. And we're seeing that many farms are struggling to survive. And so just yesterday, I think everyone saw Dean Foods, the nation's largest milk producer, our processor, filed for bankruptcy. So those are brands like Dairy Pure or Organic Valley or Land O'Lakes that even that company had to file for bankruptcy. So we're seeing economics as a major challenge for agriculture across the country. We're also related to that. I think one reason why we're seeing farms take a large interest in renewable energy is because it offers a way in which they can reduce some of those costs. It also offers a diversified revenue stream, and all these things can be important for whether or not a farm chooses to exist and chooses to produce or not. We heard from Drew, and we've have plenty of our own stories of farmers we've been working with who said it is because we adopted some form of renewable energy on our farm that has enabled us to keep on farming. And so I think that's an important thing to remember going forward, is many times renewable energy can help offset some of those costs and allow us to continue farming, which otherwise might not be economically viable. And there's a long history of the agricultural sector working with renewable energy of some sort. Wind has been popular for decades now on farms, allowing people to grow and raise cattle around or on wind farms. Obviously, bioenergy and ethanol production has also been an important part of enabling farmers to remain economically viable. And what we're talking about now with solar is different. It's unique because they're solar technologies, but it's really part of the same conversation of how are we integrating energy and different types of renewable energy on our farm activities. And so I just want to highlight the fact that solar brings with it new challenges, but it's things that we've addressed before. And I think in this room, we've heard a lot of good ideas about how best to do that. Some of you might be chuckling at the cow. I think the official technical term for that is fart bag, which is designed to capture the methane coming from the cows, which you can then use either for producing electricity or for other sorts of natural gas replacement. So that's one of the more out there activities, but it's something that people are doing. So, but when we think about solar and farms, I think there's a major perception issue we also have to confront when we talk about 900 acres or 2,000 acre projects going up, and at Otsego County, this might be the image that they have in their head of it's going to be scraped. This beautiful farmland is going to be scraped, and we're going to just have gravel or something like that. As opposed to this, where this is an example of a pollinator-friendly solar project, which can then in that project itself, that can help benefit the soil, return nutrients to the soil, benefit local farms within a 1 or 2 mile radius by providing habitat for pollinator species. I think there's a big difference for how solar is done can really affect how the perceptions of solar might be seen in different agricultural and rural areas. And so I think one of our purposes and one of our vision is that let's move away from these types of projects and more towards these types of projects, and really more broadly, what we're talking about today are all sorts of projects where we have native vegetation, pollinator habitat, we're actively growing crops under these panels, or we're supporting wildlife or other sorts of habitat. We're improving the soil in many different ways. This is sort of our vision. This is where we want to get to, and this is sort of the focus of our research. And which brings me to what we're doing. And so, in order for us to really make it such that every solar project that goes in, that is going to be on, some sort of a ground-mounted system, we would want it to have pollinator habitat or native vegetation or agricultural crops. The challenge for us was just trying to figure out what is the best crop or what is the best use of that land underneath those solar panels. And that's really where the research comes in. And this is where, what Zara mentioned earlier, we need more research on this to really best figure out what grows best, where, and importantly, why. And so that's really the focus of our research effort. So this is the INSPIRE project coming from the funded by the Department of Energy, along with partnerships with industry and other entities throughout the country. For this, we're looking at better ways to do low-impact solar development, integrating native and pollinator vegetation, integrating with grazing activities, growing agricultural crops, and trying to figure out better ways in which we can develop solar projects. As part of this effort, we have a coordinated suite of both field research sites as well as analytical sort of modeling studies. And we currently are at about 25 different field sites that are located across the country where we're looking at some of these elements, whether it's growing crops or examining pollinator habitat, examining soil moisture, examining soil carbon, et cetera. So we've got a network of sites where we're doing this, and really the question is and the driving force behind this is we can't put a test facility in every single county across the country. It's just not possible. So the power of this network and the power of this research is that we are using consistent methods, consistent approaches, combining the field research with the modeling research to help hopefully allow us to generalize and extrapolate some of these results such that we could say what happens in Minnesota, or Massachusetts or Maine, might be relevant to what might happen in New York, or what happens in one part of New York might be relevant for another part of New York. So again, we're providing those sort of consistent methods and a consistent umbrella approach that will allow us to hopefully produce that data, lead to more insights into what works and what doesn't. And then again, the important part is understanding why those things work and why they don't. A key part of our research effort is the fact that we do have an advisory group. So it's Agriculture and Solar Together Research Opportunities, or the ASTRO Advisory Group. And this is composed of members of the solar industry, the agricultural industry, state agencies, environmental organizations, and we meet together quarterly to really discuss what are these best practices, what's the latest and greatest, what are the issues we're doing, and that allows us to tailor our research efforts to make sure we are tackling the most pressing issues that are facing that either farmers or the solar industry is facing. And so when we do our research, we will have a suite of instrumentation. We'll go out there and actually collect data, whether it's through observation, whether it's for the plants such as crops or for the different types of pollinator habitat species. We'll go out there and do insect collection and insect observations as well. And so we have standardized methods and methodologies that we use that we've published. Because we have been looking at this in a systematic way on our campus since 2010. And so we've developed some fundamental methods and systematic approaches to doing this that we're trying to apply in all these locations throughout the country. Here's just an overview of some of our project sites where we can This was animated, but you can just sort of takes this map that shows our 25 sites and it highlights some of the different things we're looking at. So in some of these places, like in Oregon, for example, we're growing potatoes or melons and squash in between the rows of panels. We're also partnering with beekeepers on another site in Oregon to look at the potential for that solar-powered honey. We're working with a greenhouse company. We have other research sites that we'll talk about in the Midwest, Minnesota, and the Southeast. And so it's just a snapshot of some of the different activities that we're doing at these 25 research sites. I want to give a brief example of the work we're doing in Minnesota because I think it does highlight sort of this complete package or holistic approach that we do take. And so for this site, it is focused on pollinator habitat, but I think it's a good example of sort of the complete package of what we bring to these sites, which is, first we're looking at seed mixes. We're studying 9 different types of pollinator-friendly seed mixes because we don't know exactly what types of seed mixes that support pollinators and other beneficial insects actually will thrive under this solar environment. So we're looking at 9 different types of seed mixes as well as changing the different types of management approaches that we're doing. We're doing field transects to count different types of insects and how they are interacting with the different types of vegetation. We're doing modeling studies where we're looking at soil loss and erosion as well as carbon uptake and carbon sequestration from the different approaches of having certain types of vegetation or not having certain types of vegetation. And we're validating that through field research and monitoring and other field-based work that we have there. We've also instrumented the panels so we can look at the temperature benefits. So another benefit of having native vegetation or any sort of vegetation underneath solar arrays is that it creates a cooler microclimate, which leads to higher solar panel efficiency. So we're directly measuring that for those sites, and that translates into dollars and cents. And then we're also looking at that soil moisture issue. And soil moisture is going to be dependent upon where you are in the array as well as when it might rain and whether those panels are fixed or if they move. And so we're characterizing some of those issues at the Minnesota site as well to best understand what is that gradient of how soil moisture changes throughout the solar array. And so that's sort of just the collection of things that we're doing on these sites, the 4 sites we have in Minnesota. And that's sort of an example of what we try to do at all the other sites and to get to these insights, not only what is the outcome, but why are we seeing the performance or the improvements or the better outcomes of certain types of species than others. We talked a little bit about pollinator-friendly solar. I'll skip through that. I did want to highlight one thing, I think, because Zara mentioned earlier some of the results from the Massachusetts test study. Those are from 2016 to 2018, and I think I would not take those as the gospel, partly because some of the work that we did this year was very much interesting, whereas in 2016 to 2018, we sort of had each of those crops in a fixed location underneath the arrays. This year, however, you can see, we grew broccoli, and we put the broccoli at different parts underneath the array, whether it's in full sun or at varying levels of sun or shade. And you can see very dramatic differences, basically broccoli the size of your head to broccoli the size of your fist, depending on where we put that broccoli in that gradient. And so that's some of the research that's ongoing that we're learning that'll help us better say, okay, if we are going to grow kale, if we are going to grow broccoli, this is the optimal spot we should put it. And maybe in another row, in a spot that's more shaded, we would put it different. Maybe that's where we put kale, but we put broccoli in a different spot. And so I think this is, again, this is the research. It's exciting, it's ongoing, and we're perpetually learning more and more about how best to integrate, how best to grow crops in this agricultural environment. So the only other thing I'll highlight is we recently had a nice study published on our Arizona research site where we did see in the agrivoltaic environment, we basically saw double the yields of our tomato crops and double the yields of some of our pepper crops using the same or half as much water. And so in an arid environment, this is making a lot of sense. We're still trying to best understand what are the best approaches and what are the best configurations in the Northeast where you don't have as much excess heat and you have a lot more water. So some of our other research sites I'll go through. We're looking at I mentioned non-irrigated farming in Oregon. We're looking at runoff and irrigation techniques in Colorado. We're looking at more irrigation activities in Idaho. We're integrating with, we're having solar integrated greenhouses that we're exploring and growing crops with greenhouses that have solar panels on them. We are partnering with apiaries to evaluate the economics of beekeeping on these sites. We are working with grazers. And then there's also an opportunity for floating solar, which can, again, avoid land use and can go on agricultural reservoirs. So I'll close sort of with a few major thoughts just about this research in general and the benefits that we see. Not only are we producing data, but we're also and expanding the knowledge base just in the field. It's also an opportunity where we're working with elementary school students. We're working with university students, undergrad, grad, PhD, postdocs. To best understand, or as we do this research, we're partnering with local universities, and that gives them an opportunity to really better understand this, and also gives them a school research project. But beyond the universities, we're also working with state agencies. We're also working with energy companies. We're also working with vegetation management companies. So it's an educational activity, not just for schools, but also for the broader industry, which we think, this is a brand new area. It's something that there needs to be a lot more education. Much more, broadly to a wide array of folks, and that is, we've partnered with a number of state agencies and other industry partners, and that's sort of been a key to our success as well. So, with that, I'll only close and say here's a good example of a farm that's in Colorado that we'll be doing research on next year. That again had the case where they were not going to be financially viable. Until they were able to put solar panels on the property. And we're doing a co-location where we're going to have elevated panels over 5 acres, and we're going to be growing crops underneath those 5 acres. This is what is going to allow this farm to keep on producing. Otherwise, they would have had to, close shop. So with that, thank you very much for the time.